Hey everyone, lean in. Are you ready to hear about some really delicious ways that you can build recognition in the virtual space? Because I have my friend Robbie here. Robbie has just spent all of January writing the most delicious book on virtual engagement in meetings. And Robbie, I'm so glad that you're here because I can't wait for people to hear more about how they can create more recognition rich spaces that transcend the digital divide. Are you game?
I'm totally game. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes. All right, I know you already have ideas. Let's jump in. What would you suggest people can do super easily to build recognition and connection in the virtual meeting environment?
I believe structure is actually a big piece of belonging. And a good way to recognize people is to have really clear structures and communicate what those are. And what I mean by that is being explicit about the form and function of a meeting, the agenda,
Mm,
how you're going to take questions, when the questions are going to be addressed, the order people go in breakout rooms. Because when you don't have that, the people who feel most confident, comfortable, experienced, basically the most privileged in the room are going to have no problem grabbing the mic. And the people who feel new, uncomfortable with the topic, English isn't their first language, if that's the language you're using, they're going to like not feel like they can fully participate. There's a difference between inviting people and welcoming them. And one of the key
mm,
distinctions is being super clear about kind of the housekeeping of how we're going to use Zoom. So I have ideas in my book about those, like I have suggestions, but it's a little bit like house rules. Like you get to decide what you want to do as long as you communicate it. Now, if we were in person, you wouldn't
mhm.
end a great presentation and say, Robbie, that was amazing. Does anyone have any questions? Go ahead and start talking. But
Right.
online, all the time, people will say, that was a great presentation. Go ahead and unmute, folks, if you have anything to say. No, no,
Right.
no. In person, you would say either cue up the microphone, hand in the index card with your questions on it, raise your hand. You would give some clear instruction. But for whatever reason, in the virtual space, when we're on Zoom or Teams, whatever it is, we forget that people need those instructions.
Mhm. Two things that I just really stood out for me. Number one, value people's time. That is a form of recognition. So by giving people the clarity about what you're going to do, how long you have, and how the meeting is going to go, such as you'll get a chance to ask questions, people are like,
Mhm.
okay, this is going to be a good use of my time. That's what a key thing I heard. The other thing I heard was that you want to be constantly building community, a psychologically safe community. And if we know what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, that I've taken the time to make sure you have an agenda and you know the structure, then you also probably feel more comfortable to talk about things in that meeting as well. We never usually talk about recognition in that way, but it's really you've got to create an environment where people feel a sense of belonging. It
Yeah.
makes so much sense.
Where they
Yeah.
can share more of themselves, right? If they don't feel like they can bring everything that they are or most of the things they are into the space, they're not being recognized. You know, when people come in to a meeting or an event, they're coming in feeling, thinking, and doing one thing. And at the end of your time together, there should be a shift. They could be thinking, feeling, and doing something else. That shift should be something you think about ahead of time. That's the transformation. And if you plan for that transformation, you're really clear on those objectives, then you'll design your session with that in mind. You'll know what kind of content, the format of the content, what stories need to be sort of said and underscored. What are the takeaways? What's the pre-work? What's the homework? What exercises? How, whether or not to have a breakout room? What question to ask in the breakout room? How many people in the breakout room? How much time? All that stems from that journey you're wanting to go with. And by the way, if that journey is very tiny, you have an email. You do not have a meeting. You can
Mhm.
respect people and honor them by not having a meeting at all if it
Mhm.
doesn't warrant one.
Yeah, I love it. So tell me more about those specific design elements. I love the word you use with design. We often don't think of meetings from a design standpoint. Beautiful example of honoring people's time, building culture, and a sense of connection. Could you give us maybe three delicious things that somebody could design fairly easily, pretty quickly, that creates a spirit of connection and appreciation and recognition in a virtual environment?
Yeah. Okay. So here's three things. One is start with the breakout rooms. Sorry. start with the waiting room on,
Yeah.
so that you and your fellow speakers have a little moment ahead of time to like get your slides ready and all that. But then once you're ready to go, close the waiting room. It's the same as if you were a teacher. You would close the door and you would instruct your students, hey, if you notice the door is closed, wait in the hallway. I'm setting up the room. And when I'm ready, I will open the door. Not only will you open the door, you'll prop it open. So if any other student shows up, the door is already open, just come wandering in, right? You don't have to keep going to the door and opening it. If we leave the waiting room closed, there's a chance people are going to get stuck in the waiting room. This happened a lot in 2020. It's still happening because people are leaving those waiting rooms on. Once you're ready to go, open the room. And that way, people who either come in late or lose the internet and have to come back in, they just can come back in. So just creating a really good experience from the very start. People remember the beginning and the end of things. So like in person, if they've had a bad experience with either coat check or the valet, that's what they're going to remember. Like the rest of the meeting might have been wonderful, but that's the lines of the bar were too long. Like these are the things people remember. So creating a really good opening experience. The other thing is, as people come in, I don't want people all chit-chatting. What happens is the first few people who arrive, this is why I like the waiting room on, they get into a little conversation together, and then everyone else comes in slowly and they're not part of that conversation. What if it's their first time? They're like, wait, am I late? Because I'm actually like 2 minutes early. Wait, what are they even talking about? Oh, everyone seems like they know each other. Oh, I don't know anyone. And they might just leave. They might just leave. And like, so I actually don't even open the room until 2 minutes before. Everyone's muted. The speakers are instructed to not unmute. I write a little welcome message in chat. I ask them to update their name to include, first name, last name, pronouns if they'd like, and either their organization or their location or their region or something. And they hear a little music, and I don't ignore the music. I groove a little bit to the music so that people are like, okay, my audio and my video work. If it's a formal meeting, I'll have a countdown clock as well. It's branded with like the events logo and all that. So really think about the open experience. Like this is before the curtains open. This is the gathering of people. This is being thoughtful about how people arrive. And it's also better as a facilitator because you're not having to end that awkward person like, hey, sorry, we need to kind of all start talking about the content now. Like it's just a little abrupt and awkward to get those folks that you're fishbowling on to stop having that sidebar conversation in front of all of us. And then the last thing I guess I would mention is breakout rooms is this
Sorry,
completely
Robbie, just one
underutilized
quick
resource.
sec.
Yeah,
Sorry, can I ask you a quick question?
please.
Before, because it's such an important point that you just brought up. So I just wanted to ask you a question
Yeah.
because it's one that people have asked me. So I know you're the right one to ask. And that is, how do we create the type of environment that people would have had if they were in an in-person meeting setting, such as being able to chat informally beforehand? I love what you're saying around design. So I don't want to miss the juicy nuggets of what you're talking about around design a comfortable and an inviting, welcoming environment for everybody. And I've seen people, and I've done this sometimes too, where we put a question and we're all talking about the same thing, and you can see that. Are there any suggestions, little nuances, if people want to kind of try to create a digital environment like what would happen if you were all walking to a meeting together? Any little sidebar suggestion about that before we get to point number 3?
Yeah. So I really love the idea of actually using breakout rooms for this because
Okay.
you can plan 10 minutes into the beginning of any event, any presentation, any meeting, and give people 3 people for 6 minutes. So that gives you enough time to introduce, hey, folks, we're about to do like a little get to know you icebreaker. I love doing win-wins where people get to share a personal and professional win. I'm going to put you in groups of 3 for 6 minutes. Here's my wins for the week. So you always share your own, and then you send them off. Those are basically the people that are sitting on either side of them. That's who they're getting to chat with, right?
Gotcha.
It's enough structure. I like to give people, here's the order, alphabetically by first name or last name, or reverse alphabetical by first or last. That's my options I like to choose from. Other things take a lot of time to figure out, birth date, what shirt is brightest, length of hair. I mean, these things are subjective or take time to discuss. So I've actually had a lot of conversations about horoscopes over the pandemic because of this prompt around birthdays, which was not the topic of the breakout room. And then, other things like having the countdown clock appear so we know that 6 minutes and how much time is left, and, little reminders to switch that are typed out. So again, structure, a clear question, a clear purpose, a clear amount of time. When you come back, have people nominate someone if they had a particularly awesome win. And so they would write that person's name in either word personal, professional in this example. And then I would call on the few people, and then we all get to sort of celebrate and witness them. This is wonderful. What I love about this, talk about recognition, a first timer can get nominated. Like someone who doesn't know anyone, because of what they shared in a breakout room, someone else nominates them. They are sold in this community. Like this community has just done more to recognize their work than a lot of other people in their life.
I love it. Fantastic. Mic drop right there. All right, back to the third point that you're going to mention.
So my third point was actually structure around breakout rooms. 10,000 words in the book are about breakout rooms. And it doesn't seem like there could possibly be that much to say, but there's a lot about breakout rooms that I think people get wrong. In person, if you throw a bunch of people in a room, who knows, right? Even in person, I did a lot of structure. It was always subtle, but in the first 5 feet, they would meet 4 people, right? I was very thoughtful about how people came into a room. Similarly, how they go into the breakout room. Too many times we get sent to a breakout room. There's 4 people. We're all on mute, right? We're all like,
yeah.
Like no one knows who to unmute. And like, what were we supposed to talk about? Like you don't remember it. So saying the prompt before you send them and answering it is actually incredibly helpful because it gets people's brains engaged. Because when they hear your story, which is your answer, then their brains start coming up with an answer as well, which means they're ready to share. You're priming their brains to share. Then you tell them, oh, we're going to alphabetical by first name. Well, the people closest to A are like, oh, good chance I'm going to go first. I better be ready. And so they come in with something to share, knowing they're probably going to be first or second. They know how much time because the countdown clock. It's again, all this is structure. I believe there's a difference between engagement in a checkbox kind of way, which is when we just throw people into a room, or intentional engagement, which is really creating the environment people feel welcome to the conversation. And the way we debrief in the main room, and I've got a whole bunch of options in the book, the breakouts, the debrief by nomination just being one. I like to disrupt the default. We're going to let people self-nominate by having them raise their hand, because there's always going to be the same few people, I'm one of them, who are comfortable raising their hand. So one of the ways I do this, talk about recognition, is, hey, who took a lot of notes? So let's say you sent them off to discuss something. Some of you are really natural note takers. Who took a lot of notes? I'd love you to use the raise hand feature and share your top 2 takeaways. What we're doing is we're honoring the fact that there are some people who are naturally note takers. They probably weren't on the mic the whole time. They may not have been on the mic very much. They were very actively participating in their own way. And now we get to hear their top 2 takeaways, which will probably be really thoughtful and great for all of us to hear. And it's like those kinds of disruptions of the default way of being is part of what I mean by design.
Yeah, I love it. And a question that I don't say enough, but I love it when it occurs to me is, who is somebody who has helped you or made this meeting better for you? Type it in. If you are concerned about putting people on the spot, you can have them put their initials. Same sort of idea, right? Honor people where they're at, believe that there's great stuff, even if it's been a tense meeting, even if it's been a lot of heavy lifting and hard thinking work, we can still bring in that human piece. The person who did the note taking, somebody who made this meeting better for you. A lot of that invisible magic that happens in the breakout rooms, you can still honor it in the bigger room and even at the end of the meeting. So just so many juicy nuggets. Here's the most important thing that I hope people take away from this is, it's not even so much about the exercise, it's about the intention. That in and of itself is what recognizes people, because you put the thinking work in, and the huge passion for valuing people's time and their intelligence and their own preferences into how that meeting happened. Would you anything else you want to would bottom line or nuance with that?
Look
Robbie?
at the camera. I can't underscore the looking at the camera part enough. I once I was producing an event where the facilitator leaned forward the whole time, calling on people. And it was a really serious topic. So people were sharing very sort of vulnerable stories. And she was very encouraging, but she was doing this the whole time. Oh, yeah. So we were staring at her forehead, basically. That's not the way to hold space for people. Like, we want to honor them and hold space. Me looking at the camera is the way to do that, not when I'm like looking over here or looking at my notes over there, not looking down. It's training ourselves to look at the camera as much as possible. Doesn't mean never look away. It just means when you want to make a point, when you want someone to feel seen and heard,
Mm.
it's a habit we have to break, of just like always looking down all the time.
Love it. Yeah, so great. Thank you so much for spending the time with me and all the rock stars that I have the privilege of serving. I'm so glad that you put the image up there so that we can see. Yes, Break Out of Boredom. Thank you so much for writing this book, because so
Yeah.
many people have asked me, how do we have better virtual meetings? And of course, you're the expert, so I'm so glad that you
Thank you
put
for
this forward.
inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Have all of the best to your families and your family, Robbie, and take good care.
Great. Thank you.